Hello, and welcome back to the Mechanochemistry discussions. This seminar series is hosted by the NSF Center for Mechanical Control of Chemistry, or the CMCC. As always, the goal of the seminar series is to bring the mechanochemistry community together. Our seminars stream live on the third Thursday of every month at 11 a.m. Eastern. They are also available to watch anytime on our YouTube channel. We've had an amazing group of speakers as part of the seminar series, and I encourage you to check them out again on the YouTube channel. We also have a great group of speakers planned in the upcoming months, and we hope that you will join us for all of them. Before we get started, a few quick thank yous. First, Dr. James Batiste, the Center Director, Jennifer Belsick, our Center's Administrative Coordinator, Dr. Francesca Antolon, our Outreach Coordinator, and two CMCC students without whom this seminar would not be possible, Katie Floyd and Ryan Kwok. Thank you so much for joining us. Please do continue to follow us on the YouTube channel and watch all of our mechanochemistry discussions. Lastly, a few quick notes. Reminder that the webinar is being recorded. Questions can be emailed to us at cmccdiscussions@gmail.com, or you can post them in the YouTube account directly. Either way, they will be propagated to the speaker at the end of the seminar. Last but not least, it is my great pleasure to welcome today's seminar speaker, Dr. Clelia Righi. Dr. Righi is a full professor at the Physics Department of Bologna University in Italy. Her research activity focuses on the development and application of computational tools to understand and predict the behavior of materials from first principles, particularly of surface and interface phenomena. She adopted pioneering approaches in tribology and has applied them for understanding chemical reactions activated by mechanical stress and designing materials to reduce friction. In 2019, she received an ECR Consolidator grant for the project Advancing Solid Interfaces and Lubricants by First Principles Materials Design. Dr. Righi collaborates with multinational companies operating in the automotive and lubricant sectors. Again, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Righi to the mechanochemistry discussions.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. I would like to thank the Center for Mechanical Control of Chemistry for organizing this seminar series and for invitation to speak today. I'm going to speak about mechanochemical reactions at sliding interface, also known as tribochemical reactions. So for those who are not familiar with tribology, tribology is the science, interdisciplinary science that studies the phenomena occurring between two surfaces in contact in a relative motion. They include friction, adhesion, lubrication, and wear. And tribology is very much related to energy and the environment, since friction results in massive energy costs. So advancing the technologies to reduce friction, we may try to contribute to these global important global challenges of energy efficiency and reduction of carbon dioxide emissions. And nowadays, the technologies to reduce friction are fully based on materials. However, in comparison to other technology fully based on materials, tribology is remarkably less advanced. There is a resides in the complexity and variety of phenomena occurring at the sliding interface, such as tribochemical reactions, that are reactions involving lubricant or environmental molecules that interact with the contacting surfaces and modify their chemical composition with a consequent modification of the resistance to sliding. Indeed, this nanoasperity adhesion governs the macro-scale friction coefficient. So it's highly desirable to control these tribochemical reactions, but it's difficult because their probing through experiments is almost impossible in real time. Typically, by post-mortem analysis, it's possible to acquire information on the reaction products but very little can be inferred on the activation mechanism and reaction pathways. So simulation play an important role in this field, in particular those based on a quantum mechanical approach that allows to describe the modification to the electronic clouds induced by the mechanical stresses applied and the consequent enhanced reactivity of compounds in tribological conditions. So today I would like to show some example where we applied ab initio methods to identify key mechanism for the functionality of solid lubricants such as graphene, molybdenum diselenide layers, or diamond-like and diamond coatings, and lubricant additives. In particular, friction modifier additives that are molecules included in liquid media that play a key role in boundary lubrication conditions where the liquid is squeezed out from the contact and a direct solid-on-solid contact can take place. So these molecules form tribofilms that prevent the cold sealing of nanoasperities. I started studying from first principles tribochemistry phenomena related to diamond. Several experiments have shown that diamond friction highly depends on the environment. In particular, the friction coefficient decreases with the air humidity. As you can see here, in the results of an experiment carried out at the École Centrale de Lyon, the friction coefficient measured in vacuum is dramatically decreased as soon as the water molecules are included in the vacuum chamber, and reaching very low values. Also, the wear becomes negligible. And the tough seam analysis of the surface after the tribological test revealed that the presence of water fragments inside the wear track and not outside, indicating that this is related to tribochemical dissociation of the molecule. So to monitor in real time these tribochemical reactions, we performed for the first time in tribology ab initio molecular dynamic simulations. We consider the 001 diamond surface that present this diamond reconstruction in two different conditions that I've called dry and humid, differing for the amount of water molecules intercalated at the interface. So in this first case, the dry case, we saw that applying a load, the two surfaces undergo a cold sealing, and the water molecule dissociate in hydrogen and oxygen atoms that remain embedded in the carbon matrix that is formed, that present a high shear strength. On the contrary, when a larger amount of molecules is present, the load-induced confinement promote molecular dissociation, and the passivated surfaces remain at a high enough distance to prevent the formation of carbon-carbon bond across the interface, even if carbon dangling bonds are still present. So this result can explain the experimental observation, but what I would like to emphasize here is that the load-induced confinement highly accelerates molecular dissociation. Indeed, we calculated the energy barrier for the dissociation of a water molecule on the studied surface, the 001 surface, by applying the nudged elastic band method in conjunction with DFT calculations. And we found, basically, we identify the minimum energy path connecting the initial physisorption state to the final dissociative chemisorption state, and we found that the transition state has an energy of 0.4 eV higher than the initial state, which is the energy barrier to split water on this open surface. By applying the transition state theory, we can calculate the mean activation time for this process through this expression, where ni is the 10th frequency, which can be assumed similar to that of the frequency of surface vibrations. And so by substituting in the activation energy, the calculated value, we found activation time at room temperature of about 0.3 microseconds, which is 4 orders of magnitude higher than the simulation time in the ab initio simulation I just shown you, where molecular dissociation happened on the time scale of few picoseconds. So it's clear from this example that the kinetics of the tribochemical reactions where the molecules are confined is highly accelerated with respect to the thermally activated processes at the open surface. So the catalytic power of the tribological interface can be exploited to synthesize new materials from molecular precursors. An example is provided by this work carried out by Professor Ali Erdemir and his collaborator that show that methane molecules can be converted into graphene or other carbon nanostructure using a pin-on-disc tribometer, as that one described in this cartoon. And they observed that by including catalytic nanoparticles in the substrate, they observed a friction reduction of by 50%. And the transmission electron microscopy image of the surface debris after the tribological test revealed the presence of graphene and nano-onions that are responsible for this friction reduction. So basically, they show for the first time that solid lubricants can be produced in situ in operando conditions, so where is necessary, and without a continuous replenishment of the solid lubricant in the contact. So we investigated the atomistic mechanism of this process by performing ab initio molecular dynamic simulations of methane molecules confined at sliding nickel interfaces. You can see here on the top a lateral view of our interface, and here in the bottom the top view of the substrate surface with the molecules. So during the simulation, we observed the immediate dissociation of the methane molecules, and sorry, it's not going very smoothly, with the diffusion of the carbon of the hydrogen atoms into the nickel bulk. This process is not energetically favorable at the open surface, while we can see that this happens very easily in tribological conditions where the molecules are confined. And the carbon atoms on the surface gather in forming short hydrocarbon chains. In a second set of simulations, we increased the concentration of these carbon atoms to mimic the hydrogenation process that was continuing. And we observed that the formation of carbon chains, the length of which increases during the simulation, until all the carbon atoms are included in a carbon chain. And these chains becomes more and more cross-linked, forming an amorphous film with low density, the thickness of which decreases during the rubbing process. Indeed, in the final set of simulations at full coverage, we observed a hybridization of the carbon atoms and the formation of carbon rings. You can see here from the top that rings are forming. Rings should be formed here, and a small graphitic flake, graphene flake is created that can function as seeds for the growth of a graphene layer. This re-hybridization of the carbon atoms can be also quantitatively measured by calculating the radial distribution function. The first peak corresponds to the bond length. So the radial distribution function is, so we can see that the bond length measured for structure A, where the carbon atoms form carbon chains, is shorter than that formed in structure B, where planar rings were formed, and in this flake that is here highlighted in red, because in the first situation we have sp bonds along the chain, while in the second case we have sp2 bonds, and indeed the length of these bonds is very similar to that of a graphene layer, here reported in blue for comparison, and affected graphene layer. So basically, we observe that the simultaneous effect of load and shear promote the planar structure, flat structure, and so the growth of 2D materials. The synthesis of 2D structures, precisely transition metal dechalcogenides, was also observed in this work done in collaboration with Carsten Gashon and Ali Erdemir, where we show that by sprinkling a selenium nanopowder on a sliding contact where the substrate surface was covered by a molybdenum or tungsten film, thanks to tribochemical reactions, molybdenum diselenide or tungsten diselenide layers are formed. And this process is accompanied by reduction of friction as measured in the experiment. You can see here in black the coefficient of friction before, and in red after the application of the nanopowder, the selenium nanopowder. The wear is also reduced, as shown by these three-dimensional images of the wear tracks acquired by the laser scanning microscopy. And the Raman analysis of the surface after the tribological test indicate that inside the wear tracks molybdenum diselenide is present and not outside. And the transition electron microscopy image show that layer structure are present in an amorphous tribofilm, and the interlayer spacing is the typical interlayer spacing of molybdenum diselenide. So we performed ab initio molecular dynamic simulations to study this process from an atomistic point of view. We consider selenium molecules and molybdenum debris confined between two molybdenum diselenide layers that were used just to impose the load and shear. And we observed that after compressing the structure already, the selenium particles start disgregating, and this process continue under tribological conditions, where we observe also a diffusion, a redistribution of the atoms. The particles completely disgregates, and we observe that the selenium atoms tend to occupy the outermost atomic planes of this layer that is forming, while molybdenum atoms move in the inner part. And thanks to load and shear, a structural phase transition is taking place, and the amorphous structure is transformed in a crystalline layer, and that has, of course, lower friction. I would like to show another example where this time related to liquid lubricants, including additives. There is nowadays increasing interest in identifying friction modifier additives that are eco-friendly and do not contain sulfur and phosphorus. And another key challenge is to design lubricants able to provide a super lubricity, that is a friction coefficient below than 0.01, even in harsh conditions. We propose that aromatic molecules, hypericin molecules of plant origin can meet these requirements when included as lubricant additives in glycerol. And their function is ruled by mechanochemical reactions that promote their activation and then polymerization into graphene. So in experiments performed at the École Centrale de Lyon by the group of Maria Isabelle de Barreau-Boucher and Jean-Michel Martin, it was found that adding just 0.3% hypericin into glycerol stabilizes the friction coefficient of a silicon steel tribopair for more than 2 hours. Stabilize the friction coefficient to values lower than the superlubricity threshold. And the performance remains effective even when the temperature rises at 80 degrees Celsius degrees. The high resolution transmission electron microscopy image revealed that a graphene layer is formed on top of a tribofilm of hypericin molecules, and that the oxygen content in the silicon carbide substrate increases from the bulk towards the surface, especially in contact with the hypericin tribofilm. So we performed ab initio molecular dynamic simulations, first considering just one hypericin molecule confined in between two silicon carbide slabs. And we observed that in these tribological conditions, the lateral groups are detached. You will observe in a second the detachment of this hydroxyl group and its subsequent dissociation in oxygen and hydrogen atoms. And this process is related to the fact that this silicon, you see the dissociation now, this silicon terminated surface of silicon carbide is polar. The silicon atoms present a positively partial charge that attract oxygen and hydroxyl group favoring their dissociation, especially in these tribological conditions. Indeed, at the end of this simulation, basically all the lateral groups containing oxygen or hydroxyl group were dissociated from the molecule. And this is consistent with experimental observation of an increased concentration of oxygen in the silicon carbide substrate, especially in the region near the hyperesin film. Okay, we then simulated more than one molecule in tribological conditions, and we identify key chemical mechanism in such as the formation of carbon-carbon bonds and ether group among different molecules. So having characterized by ab initio simulations the most important tribochemistry mechanism taking place within the effective molecular tribofilm, we then used classical molecular dynamic simulations based on reactive force field to simulate larger scale system after having tested that the use potential was able to reproduce the ab initio results. And here you can see the larger scale simulations containing 84 hyperesin molecules in sliding conditions. We confine the molecules, I'm sorry, that is not continuously. We confine the molecules in between two diamond slabs, hydrogenated, that are used just to apply the load and the shear. We are focusing on the tribochemical reactions inside the molecular tribofilm, and we observe that, and we consider standard molecules and molecules containing dangling bonds, as we saw that dangling bonds can be formed in tribological conditions, especially in contact with silicon carbide. So we observed the formation of graphene patches thanks to the polymerization of these molecules that form carbon-carbon and ether group among them. And it's interesting to notice that the area of these patches increases with the amount of defects, and the friction force decreases with the increasing area of these graphene patches, consistently with experimental observation that a graphitic layer was formed at the top of this film of hyperesin molecule, and this provide super lubricity conditions. Okay, so I just want to finish my presentation mentioning that we are studying water-based lubricants, trying to optimize their function, because petroleum-based lubricants are of course based on a non-renewable resource. We know that the world crude oil reserve might end in the near future. They can be toxic, and a small amount of oil can pollute a large volume of water, and they are not biodegradable. Instead, water is abundant, cheap, non-toxic, and biodegradable. But poor water is not a good lubricant, of course, because of its low viscosity, and it can also accelerate corrosion in metallic surfaces. So the functionality of water-based lubricants is relying on additives that should inhibit corrosion, improve the viscosity index, and reduce friction, even in boundary lubrication. But in order to model a system composed by the liquid media and the additive, of course, molecular ab initio MD is not feasible. And we have introduced for this tribochemistry study the use of machine learning interatomic potentials that are used in many scientific applications, already used successfully in many scientific applications, because they seem to have solved the accuracy versus efficiency dilemma. So they are able to accurately describe the atomistic interactions and have the efficiency of classical MD to simulate the system evolution. There are a number of machine learning algorithms, but they have as a common feature the fact that they are basically they are used to interatomic potential are created by fitting or interpolating ab initio data through neural networks. And neural networks are just interpolators, so they do not have any physical meaning. So these potentials should be used with attention, because they can produce they produce a reliable dynamics when the system evolves in the regions of the configuration space that was sampled during the training. But they can produce physical results in regions that were poorly explored during the training. And this is particularly true for the tribological systems where this configuration space is highly corrugated. So we we developed a software to train accurate machine learning potentials to be used also in tribological conditions. Basically, starting from an initial data set, a network is created and is used to explore through molecular dynamics the configuration space. In this exploration phase, new systems are automatically generated through a feature that we call collaging, that is combining different parts of the system and also changing the conditions of temperature, pressure automatically. And using an algorithm for already used for active learning, we identified the configuration that have a higher model deviation. These configurations are selected. This is the label phase, and the ab initio energy forces are calculated for these configurations. And the cycle continues until no new configuration are labeled. In this way, a data set of smart configurations is created and can be used to train different potentials. For example, our code can be used in conjunction with DeepMD and MACE. So we use this software to create an accurate potential for describing iron interfaces interacting with water and molecular additive containing aromatic molecules. Yeah. And so the efficiency of this simulation allowed us to increase the size of the system and model a nanoasperity on a time scale of several nanoseconds. For example, but still describing in an accurate way the tribochemistry. For example, here you can see that if we use just water, water is not a good lubricant. We observe a cold sealing of the nanoasperity on the substrate. You can see here the formation, the nucleation of these locations. This is a catastrophic event. While in the presence of additives, we are considering molecules of plant origin. The situation is different. We never observed a cold sealing, and the tribochemistry is anyway well described, so that we could also identify differences in the molecular behavior. For example, after a while, here we started observing an interaction of the two metallic surfaces. So this is ongoing, but it seems very promising. And I would like to just move to the conclusion. So we used ab initio calculations to describe tribochemical reactions and identify key processes for the functionality of lubricant materials. For example, the load-induced confinement effect on molecular dissociation in accelerating molecular dissociation, and the passivation that can be induced in diamond surfaces by the dissociation of water molecule and the consequent reduction of the friction coefficient. We also observe that the combined effect of load and shear can promote the hybridization of elements such as carbon and the formation of 2D materials. Indeed, we presented I presented the example of methane conversion into graphene and the formation of slippery molybdenum diselenide layers from a molybdenum a selenium nanopowder. Finally, I also showed that the mechanical activation of aromatic molecules and their consequent polymerization can be used as a strategy to design eco-friendly additives from molecules of plant origin that can provide very low friction. And finally, I mentioned that thanks to the efficiency of machine learning informed molecular dynamic simulation, is now possible to simulate the additives included into the liquid media with the accuracy necessary to describe tribochemical reactions. So these large-scale simulations can be used as to perform sort of in silico experiments to test the performances of different molecules. I would like to thank my previous and present collaborators who contributed to the work that I presented today. And I would like to also thank the European community for the ERC project slide. And I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Let's do a few questions from the audience. First, how do load and shear work together or against one another to promote chemical reactions?
Okay, in the first example that I show you, just load was applied, and it was interesting, this simulation, because we saw that just with molecular confinement, the molecular dissociation can be accelerated. So in reducing the interfacial spacing and creating an overlap of the surface and molecule electronic clouds, this accelerates the reaction. While in other simulations, we applied both load and shear through a modification of the ab initio program included in Quantum Espresso that we did in our group, we made in our group. And in this case, we could also appreciate the effect of shear that enhanced the diffusivity of the atom. So, for example, it's clear, for example, in this case, it helps the atoms finding the right position to form a new structure.
Thank you. All right, next question. You mentioned that the SI terminated SiC surface is polar. Is Si the normal termination for SiC? And how polar is the SiC surface? For example, what is the size of the dipole?
Okay, so yes, this is a polar surface because of the difference in the electronegativity between carbon and silicon. So, of course, carbon acquire partial negative charge in silicon carbide and silicon a positive charge, partial charge. And so the silicon carbide, this silicon carbide surface, the 111 surface, is polar. And we have a positive partial charge on silicon atoms. I don't remember right now the amount of this partial charge. It's probably written in the paper, but it was known from the literature. I have in mind a paper where water was absorbed on this silicon carbide surface and it spontaneously dissociates because of the attraction of the hydroxyl from the silicon atoms that can capture the hydroxyl group and promote molecular dissociation. And so we observed a similar mechanism here, even enhanced because of this confinement effect.
Okay, thank you. Another question. In one of the later slides, you showed the sliding contacts with tannins and flavonoids. Do you capture the formation of chemical intermediates, or do you only see the breakdown of these compounds and a transition to graphitic-like materials?
Actually, here the mechanism is a little bit more complicated. It depends on the structure of the molecules and on their chemistry, but also the structure and the ability of the structure to carry the load due to high steric hindrance of the tannin molecules tested in this case with respect to flavonoids seem the key feature to provide better performances.
Thank you. All right, we'll do a few more here. So there's a lot of questions, so I'll just pick a few more. Generally, how do you calibrate the pressure or forces for the interface molecules?
Actually, we do not apply the forces directly on the molecules. Typically, we apply the forces on the topmost layer of the above slab. And usually we try to mimic a pressure of about 1 gigapascal or 100 megapascal, trying to resemble the experimental contact pressure. So by dividing the total force that is obtained by summing up the forces on each atom, dividing it by the area of our simulation box. Sometimes we apply even larger pressure, especially in ab initio molecular dynamic simulations where we want to accelerate the reaction because these simulations are computationally demanding. So increasing the load makes everything happening in shorter time scales. But yeah, we typically apply the load at the outermost layer of our slab, not directly on the interfacial molecules.
Got it. Thank you. I think we have time for just one more. Let's do one more. Can you please expand on how SCS works to incorporate more physical meaning into the neural networks and AI systems?
Actually, it doesn't incorporate physical meaning because what is the output is just a data set. But a data set of very strategic configurations that are identified through the process that I explained before. So there is a very accurate exploration of the potential energy surface. So through molecular dynamics, the surface is very accurate explored. New system, new conditions of pressure, temperature are automatically generated. So many possibilities are sampled. And this is why it is efficient because the exploration phase is very, very efficient, and it's also nice that everything is done automatically so that creating this system, changing the conditions, the human effort is reduced at minimum. so this is why at the end, the data set that is produced is really smart and can be used with different architecture to create different neural network potentials. And so this is also an important feature that at the end we provide a data set that you can use as you prefer, but of configurations that can sample very well this configuration space.
Got it. Thank you very much, and thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and see you soon.
Thank you, Professor Righi, for that outstanding presentation, and thank you so much for joining us. A reminder that all of our seminars as part of the mechanochemistry discussions are available to watch anytime on the YouTube channel. We also have a great group of speakers planned for the upcoming months, and we hope that you will join us for all of them. Thank you again.